Greetings, my friends. I am Dictor Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, broadcasting from Section X Studios at the center of the Earth, and this is the Pop Culture Breakdown with Overlord DVD, a rundown of the top pop culture stories and rumors of the day. In this installment, I have an incredible update on the state of Star Wars post-Lucasfilm Civil War that, if this source is the real deal, is going to clarify the current plans for the erasure of the Disney sequel trilogy and excite EU fans with some breaking news straight from inside the belly of the beast itself. Star Wars fans will not want to miss this. I also have some outrageous rumors regarding what a horror show Doctor Who has become behind the scenes, along with the story behind one of the worst scenes in Doctor Who history. And finally, I bring you sad tidings of just how badly Loki is performing on Disney+, because apparently at one key point in the narrative, viewers had a very interesting reaction to it, if this rumor is true. And so, without further ado, let's get to our first story and take a look at just how bad things are for Doctor Who. My friends, I have been in contact with a source behind the scenes of Doctor Who for a very long time now. This source has told me things off the record before now, but at this point the source feels comfortable enough to allow me to share what they have told me about the horrible state of Doctor Who behind the scenes of the BBC. I cannot say very much about this source at all, except to tell you that while I must treat all of what I'm about to tell you as rumor, and I ask you to do the same, I feel fairly comfortable that this source is sincere and that the information I'm about to tell you has a greater chance of being genuine than typical. That said, as always, please consider all of this as rumor and take it with a grain of salt. So I am told that 2 season finales have been filmed for the current series, which will put Jodie Whittaker's Doctor out of our misery. To cover all the bases at the time, without knowing who was going to succeed Jodie, and succeed is a good way to phrase it since almost anyone would do the role better than she did in my opinion, they allegedly filmed 2 regeneration scenes. One regeneration scene with a woman in green face, and one with a man in green face. At the time, they had not actually locked in the actor or actress, and they were hedging their bets. More on that in a minute. Interestingly, I am told that casting the next series after Jodie's swan song is proving to be a real headache for the BBC, courtesy of China. I'm told that China told the BBC in no uncertain terms that they won't pay to air this coming season if, quote, the black guy was in it, unquote, and won't air the next if there's a black guy in it. And moreover, allegedly, they want a Chinese character in the show. So it looks like the BBC is taking marching orders from Taiwan now, as they're forced to take China's potential displeasure into account moving forward. Good to know that racial and sexual politics are trumping good writing, which is just what we want in our entertainment, right gang? But hold on, it gets worse. Turns out, if this rumor is true, the American streaming services are not happy with the viewing figures that Doctor Who under Chibnall has been pulling, and so they are demanding a course correction. My source claims that current writing notes being given behind the scenes are about doing what they did in the 1996 movie in terms of changes to Doctor Who canon, namely, outright ignoring them. In the 1996 movie, they established that the Doctor was part human, which all the following productions ignored and pretended didn't happen. There is evidently a push being made for a soft reboot along similar lines, but only in terms of retconning the 13th Doctor shit show. This is in keeping with Jodie Whittaker's statement that she will not return for a crossover of Doctors after her swan song. That may not be a personal choice on her part. Simple fact of the matter may be, she knows she won't be asked. Frankly, I hope all of this is true, as it would be nice to know that even at that socialist haven of mediocrity frequently referred to as the BBC, woke wankery has consequences, and there is a price to pay for demolishing one of the biggest sci-fi franchises in history. My source tells me that in light of these developments, while there are glimmers of hope on the horizon, the BBC Politburo is retaliating by doubling down on the number of woke writers they employ. I sure do wish they'd save some of the criticism of critical theory for their own scripts, which are not fit to line the cages of the most dyspeptic parrots. And now, more on the story behind the casting of the new Doctor and the two different regeneration scenes shot with greenface, one male and one female. I'm told the first choice of the BBC to cast the new Doctor was Tilda Swinton. Personally, I think she has the depth and presence to have made a good Doctor, although of course the Doctor is male and always will be, but never mind that now. Tilda Swinton was an exciting choice because of the keen intelligence she brings to her roles, but alas, that same keen intelligence told her not to take her role on Chibnall's utterly ruined shit show, and so in the end, she declined. Their second choice, Adrian Lester, was all but set to take the role of the Doctor until China made their demand that there should be no black actors cast in leading roles. So reportedly, the BBC bent the knee to their Asian masters, and that was that for Adrian. Their next choice was a hard pass when the actress under consideration demanded way too much money. I don't have a name for her, but I'm told she was featured in EastEnders. And that brings us to choice number 4, confirmed in the press to be the openly gay actor Ollie Alexander. But it's rather amusing that they moved through the casting of the Doctor in a kind of woke hierarchy. They moved from experienced woman to black dude to inexperienced woman to gay man. But get this, gang, this is where things get pretty juicy. I am told that when the BBC was thinking they'd be hiring a black man to be the Doctor, the woke wankers on staff at Doctor Who came up with an episode concept that would have been more woke than a bottle of uppers soaked in coffee. Get this, folks. The writers were reportedly, according to this source, planning an episode of Doctor Who that took place on a plantation, with the master being a master. Yes, indeed. They were actually, according to this source, going to have a Gallifreyan, the master, being the master on a plantation in the Deep South, presumably putting the Doctor to work in the cotton fields. But evidently, the woke writers couldn't even get that historical detail right, as they asked Idris Elba to be the master, but fortunately for Idris Elba's career, he pulled out once Tilda Swinton pulled out. But just imagine the horrors of this particular concept. Dear God in heaven, what a shit show these woke wankers make. Evidently, John Barrowman is signed on for a few more guest spots as Captain Jack, and while no showrunner is currently confirmed, I'm told Russell T Davies is in talk about returning. Russell, if you're watching this, and I doubt you are, my advice to you, run! Run as fast as your legs can carry you, sir. Run away from the smoldering ruins of the show that used to be called Doctor Who. But now, we come to what I think is the most interesting rumor of them all, the story behind the worst scene in the history of Doctor Who, in my opinion. Viewers of this last series of Doctor Who, or should I more properly say witnesses to the train wreck that destroyed the franchise, will recall the absolutely horrific scene when Graham told Dr. Jodie that he had cancer. That scene was absolutely cringe as it was filmed, and fans were almost universally horrified at her reaction, which was simply to brush it off, muttering something about being awkward and ignoring Graham. I am told that a writer on staff knew that simply wouldn't do and ghost wrote a scene that was very different from what was aired. Now, of course, I can attest to none of this. I have not seen the script, but this, at least, is what the source told me. This scene reportedly played out in a similar fashion to what aired, but I'm told it had a fatal flaw. It relied on Jodie's acting skills, and that's why it was stripped down. Here's the gist of the scene, as it was written. Graham tells Dr. Jodie that he has cancer. At this point, Jodie is supposed to, act. Her face is supposed to register a mix of emotions, concern, fear, sorrow. There's a pause as she looks down at the console a moment as if trying to hide from the emotion of the moment, and then she looks back up at Graham, this time with open sadness in her eyes. She walks over to Graham and hugs him, telling him, "Don't worry, I'll make sure Ryan won't be alone, I promise." Graham embraces her back and cries in her arms. She looks up into his eyes, and that's when she tells him, "Sorry, I'm just not good with emotions and stuff." What I'm told is, they butchered this scene in the editing to cover up for deficiencies in Jodie's acting. Meanwhile, Bradley Walsh was pissed off because this was his big emotional scene, and that, I am told, is one of the reasons why he decided to leave the show. No actor wants to put his heart and soul into a part only to have it wind up on the editing room floor, never to be seen by fans. Frankly, of all the franchises out there in the world these days, it is my firm belief that Doctor Who has been savaged the worst. The ultimate retconning of everything about the Doctor, about the Time Lords, about Gallifrey, has left the show a smoldering ruin of its former glory. Turning the founder of the Time Lords into a child-murdering woman who steals the Doctor's regenerating abilities by killing the Doctor, him, her, or it, over and over and over again, until Tectayun, the Gallifreyan thief, was able to capture that essence, is one of the most revolting things I've ever seen. China shouldn't be concerned about a black man getting a leading role. It should be concerned about shit writing from woke wankers who aren't qualified to write the ingredient list on the back of a packet of crisps. And now, this. Once again, my source inside Disney has reached out with some hard viewing figures for Loki and Bad Batch, and it turns out that Loki is going the way of Falcon and the Winter Soldier in terms of steadily declining viewers and in terms of a shared tune-out time, or TOT, on one episode that sent people scrambling for the virtual exits at more or less the same time, well before the end credits. So let's look at the history of Loki, from the premiere to the present ratings, breaking down my communications with my sources by date. By way of comparison and background information, let's take a look at the rumored performance of some of the past series on Disney+. On May 3rd, I got word from my source via my Hollywood spies that Falcon and Winter Soldier had not produced the hoped-for uptick in subscriptions of people wanting to binge it. According to this source, and since I absolutely cannot personally vouch for any of this information, I present it strictly as rumor and ask you to take it with a grain of salt. Falcon and Winter Soldier was flat after episode 2, and subscriptions went down during its premiere run on Disney+. It reportedly had an average rating of 4.7 million views, with a rating of 1.5 in the key 18 to 49 demographic. WandaVision did a bit better with a 2.1 in that key demographic, so between WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier, there was a downward trend that Disney finds worrisome. For that reason, there was a lot of pressure on Loki to perform, and the source said, quote, "If it follows the same downward trend from episode 1 to the last episode, there's a chance Disney may start to panic, and I mean really panic, and start changing things. We will have to wait and see," unquote. So on June 13th, I received word that the premiere of Loki did extremely well, getting 40 million views by that point in time, and Disney was hoping this was the turning point. But unfortunately, come June 17th, I received the following message, quote, "Loki E2 did not do as well this week, coming in around 10.8 million views, less than half of the views episode 1 had by this point after its release. It's still too early to tell if it will have a weekend rebound," unquote. Then on June 21st, I received word that while the Bad Batch had stabilized at around 300 to 350,000 views a week, Loki had only picked up a little bit in the ratings, and by June 25th, I received word that the new episode of Loki had dropped radically to only 2 million views at that point in time. While there was certainly a chance it could recover over the weekend, this was clearly a very, very bad trend. To go from 90 million views, a final ratings estimate of the first episode, to 2 million views in 3 episodes. My source reported that this downward spiral had Disney in panic mode, so much so that they held a major meeting that following Monday to discuss this downward trend. I have not been able to find out what the outcome of that meeting was, but this was only the beginning of Disney's problems in regard to Loki. The next part is a spoiler for Loki, although almost everyone who is watching Loki will know about what I'm about to talk about, since it aired around June 30th. On that date, I received word from my source on an issue related to the tune-out time for that episode. For those of you who don't know, the tune-out time refers to the point when each viewer stops watching the episode. Disney tracks this information, although they might wish they didn't, since, according to my source, quote, almost no one is finishing this episode. Almost 85% of viewers are turning it off at the end, unquote. When asked why, the source gave my Hollywood agents the timestamp and told us to go see for ourselves. So we did. Turns out the point when almost 85% of viewers tuned out of Loki was the point where male Loki died. Then on July 1st, I received an update that the tune-out times on that episode were still tracking high, with around 65% of viewers not finishing the episode. And along with that, I was told that there had been at that time a number of viewers canceling Disney Plus, with approximately 50,000 paid subs gone. Not a huge number to be sure, relative to the overall subscriber base, but any losses are a step in the wrong direction as far as Disney is concerned, and rightly so. So bearing in mind this is all mere rumor and should be taken with a grain of salt, judging from the reactions of fans, I do find this information to be at least plausible, if unverified. I myself have had a hard time getting into this show because of all the wokeness and the lack of respect for Hiddleston's Loki from the start. I can absolutely see that fans didn't tune in to see Loki turn into a good guy and then killed, but apparently another white male bites the dust in preparation for Phase 4 of the MCU, and if this is the shape of things to come, Disney might want to rethink what they're doing with Phase 4, because this shit is not what fans want. And now, for some interesting Star Wars news. I now present to you a wealth of Disney Star Wars rumors from a source claiming to be inside Lucasfilm and/or Disney, some of which clarify and add detail to recent rumors I've reported on, along with something that may be a brand new scoop about a top secret project that, if true, will make EU fans extremely excited. But at this point, I want to pull out a heaping bag full of salt and offer you a heaping tablespoon of salt to take along with this news, and I'll explain why. This is a source that I've dealt with before, and when I've shared information from this source in the past, I have offered a similar salt warning. Why, you ask? While I have no reason to distrust this source, this is a source that came directly to me, not vetted by my network of Hollywood spies. This source does at least appear to have excellent access to information, but for the reason that this source hasn't gone through the usual vetting, I have to caution you that there is at least a chance this is disinformation or trolling. Although if that's the case, at least it'll lay to rest the SJW-sponsored idea that I have no sources. At any rate, I ask you to please consider all of this as unverified rumor and to take it with a tablespoon of salt. To start with, this source confirms that the powers that be at Disney, quote, had a large hand, unquote, in the recent article in The Atlantic that threw Kathleen Kennedy under the bus for her mismanagement of Star Wars. As we suspected, this source claims the sources interviewed for that article were, quote, generally the upper echelon of Disney, read the killer bees, unquote. The source then goes on to confirm my earlier reporting of a rumor that Kennedy intends, when the dust settles on Indiana Jones 5, to, quote, replace Indy with his young female apprentice, unquote. The source then goes on to indicate that this was a huge source of tension between Spielberg and Kennedy, tension that got so bad at one point that Spielberg reportedly said something very unkind about Miss Kennedy, which I will not quote here out of, well, respect? I don't know. Since I can't confirm this quote, I'm just going to leave that quote out of it since it's not germane to the larger story, aside from the purported fact that it documents that tensions did exist, tensions which may have been the cause of Spielberg's departure from the project. The source concludes that Spielberg will not be working with Kathleen Kennedy again. Enough said, if true. All that said, my source claims, quote, the news is not all bad this week. Dave and John are seeking to get a meeting with Gina Carano to discuss her return to the Star Wars universe, unquote. Dave Filoni is quoted as saying, quote, we'll go with hat in hand and beg like starving dogs at the dinner table if we have to, unquote. The source continues, quote, John is willing to work around whatever schedule Gina had in regards to her contract with Daily Wire. Just to get her in the office is going to be a win, unquote. This is very good news if true, and no surprise, frankly. Rangers of the New Republic is supposed to be a Gina Carano vehicle, and without Gina, there is no show, or at least no show without a heavy revision. Certainly, given the massive fan backlash that would surely follow any attempt to recast Cara Dune with a different actress, and given that a trio of shows, The Mandalorian, Rangers of the New Republic, and Ahsoka, are being coordinated to build towards revising the sequel trilogy out of relevance, a plan that frankly is key to saving Star Wars by minimizing the damage done to the Star Wars universe by Kennedy's sequel trilogy, it makes a lot of sense that Favreau will move heaven and earth to get Gina back into the fold. And now, we get to the juicy part, folks. Fasten your seatbelts. Here's where we make some news. My source claims, quote, 1. Dave and John have decided not to totally erase the sequels. Those will be relegated to the Star Wars Extended Universe or Extended Universe of What If style stories. Also, put into that category will be Solo and High Republic. 2. The impact of the original characters will be very much felt in the Mandalorian verse, and more surprise cameos will happen. 3. They are working on a completely new project involving the time period right after the fall of the Empire. And here's where it gets very interesting, folks. This new project will involve a certain blue-skinned villain and the unexplored regions. Plans are now for an animated series, but live action is not totally off the table, unquote. So, that's a lot to take in. But what does it all mean? Firstly, it serves as confirmation that the Disney sequel trilogy is not going to stand as the final word on Luke Skywalker's fate. Obviously, there was never any way that all the DVDs and streaming copies of the sequel trilogy episodes were ever going to be yanked from circulation like a defective Pinto off of the market. So in a sense, this isn't news exactly, except insofar as it yet again acknowledges that John and Dave are absolutely aware that the sequel trilogy cannot remain canon in the Star Wars universe, and so those stories are going to be shunted over to the realm of what-if Elseworld stories that never happened in any official sense in terms of canon. There will be a new timeline that will serve as the official story for Luke Skywalker, giving him an ending in keeping with his status as the heart and soul of Star Wars. It is also good news that Solo, which lost money, and the High Republic, all of those failures will be shoved aside and placed in the same isolated and problematic category. But most excitingly of all, this source claims an entirely new project is in development, either an animated series or a live-action series, and I betcha, Banthas to Bobolinks, that blue-skinned alien is none other than Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Zon Trilogy. Clearly, that was the implication behind the, quote, blue-skinned alien comment, although for some reason this source declined to refer to Thrawn by name. If this is true, I'm hoping against hope that this will be a fully budgeted live-action series and not simply another animated piece. While I do have a fondness for the animated Star Wars material, I have to say a live-action Thrawn series would be one of the few shows that could get hardcore Star Wars fans as excited as they were for the return of Luke Skywalker. If you like this idea, please let Disney know in the comments. I have a feeling they'll be paying attention. And that concludes this edition of Pop Culture Breakdown. From Section X Studios at the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry. Ha 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 ha